The hangar smelled like jet fuel and desperation. It was 11:47 p.m. at Naval Air Station North Island, and the clock above hangar F-57 ticked like a countdown to disaster. The experimental fighter jet sat dead on the deck, lifeless as a corpse. Admiral Catherine Reed stood with her arms crossed, her four-star insignia catching the harsh fluorescent light. Her face was stone. 6 military engineers had failed. Washington was breathing down her neck. The jet had to fly in 5 hours. She turned to the civilian contractor in grease-stained coveralls. "Fix this jet, and I'll marry you," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. The officers laughed. Ethan Walker didn't. His phone still glowed with his daughter's text. "Daddy, I'm scared." He looked up. "As long as I'm done before she wakes up." The laughter died. Nobody put a child before an admiral's order. But Ethan Walker was a father first. 6 hours earlier, Washington had issued the order. The experimental fighter jet in hangar F-57 had to be airborne by 5 in the morning. It carried classified navigation systems vital to an overseas operation. Failure wasn't an option. The problem was brutal and simple. The jet was completely dead. 6 military engineers had tried everything for the past 6 hours. They'd stripped panels, tested circuits, replaced modules, run every diagnostic in the book. Nothing worked. The bird wouldn't even power up. Admiral Catherine Reed had been pulled from a critical briefing in Washington and flown straight to San Diego on a military transport. She was 49 years old, a decorated 4-star admiral with 3 combat deployments and a reputation for results. She didn't tolerate excuses. She didn't tolerate weakness, and she certainly didn't tolerate failure. When she walked into hangar F-57 at 11:30 p.m., every spine in the room straightened. Her presence filled the space like a cold front moving in. "Status," she barked. The lead engineer, a lieutenant commander with sweat staining his uniform, stepped forward. "Ma'am, we've exhausted every protocol. The jet's core system is completely unresponsive. We believe it's a cascade failure in the primary relay, but we can't isolate the source." Reed's jaw tightened. "Then find someone who can." The lieutenant hesitated. "There's one option. We have a civilian contractor on base. Night shift maintenance. He used to work military tech before he left the service." Reed's eyes flashed. "Get him. Now." 20 minutes later, Ethan Walker walked into the hangar. He was 38 years old, lean and quiet, with the kind of face that had seen too much and said too little. His hands were calloused from years of manual work. His boots were scuffed and worn. He looked like every other contract worker on base, forgettable, invisible, just another body filling a shift. But his eyes told a different story. They were sharp, focused, and tired in a way that had nothing to do with the late hour. Ethan's entire life revolved around one thing: his daughter Sophie. She was 8 years old, with her mother's bright smile and her father's quiet stubbornness. 7 years ago, Ethan's wife had died in a car accident on a rainy November night. In one terrible moment, he'd become both father and mother to a 1-year-old girl. His morning started at 6. He made breakfast, packed lunches with little notes inside, walked Sophie to the bus stop, and watched until she was safely on board. Then he worked a 12-hour shift at the naval base, fixing jets and electrical systems for government contractors who paid him just enough to cover rent, health insurance, and Sophie's school tuition. At night, he came home exhausted. He helped with homework, made dinner, read bedtime stories, and tucked her in. Then he sat in her doorway and watched her sleep, terrified that one day she'd ask him why their life was so small, why they couldn't afford the field trips other kids took, why Daddy always looked so tired. Ethan had left the Navy to protect her, not from physical danger, but from something worse: shame. And tonight, standing in front of Admiral Catherine Reed, under the harsh lights of hangar F-57, he felt the full weight of that choice pressing down on him. Reed looked him up and down with barely concealed contempt. Her expression didn't change. "You're the miracle worker they called in?" Ethan shook his head slowly. "I'm just a technician, ma'am. Can you fix it or not? Depends on what's actually broken." Reed stepped closer. her voice dropping to something cold and cutting. Let me be perfectly clear. This jet flies in 5 hours, or careers end. Mine. Yours. Everyone's in this room, so if you can't do it, say so right now. And I'll find someone who can. Ethan met her eyes without flinching. I'll take a look. He moved to the jet, pulling a small, worn toolkit from his canvas bag. The officers watched him like spectators at surgery, skeptical and silent. Ethan knelt beside the main access panel and opened it carefully. Inside was a nightmare of wiring, burnt insulation, melted connectors, charred circuits. He ran his fingers along the edges slowly, reading the damage like a blind man reading Braille. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen quickly. It was Sophie. A text message. Daddy, I heard thunder. I'm scared. When are you coming home? His chest tightened painfully. He texted back with one hand while inspecting a relay with the other. I'm here, sweetheart. I'll be home very soon. I love you so much. One of the junior officers standing nearby smirked. Got a hot date waiting for you? Ethan didn't look up from his work. His voice was quiet but firm. I have a daughter waiting for me. The smirk vanished instantly. Reed was watching from 10 feet away. She didn't say anything, but her eyes lingered on him a moment longer than before, something shifting almost imperceptibly in her expression. Ethan traced a burnt wire deeper into the panel, following its path with his flashlight. This wasn't just a power surge, he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. This was a cascade failure. Something in the core relay failed catastrophically and took half the system down with it. The lead engineer stepped forward eagerly. We know that much. We just can't find the source of the initial failure. Ethan pulled a small flashlight from his belt and shone it deep into the dark cavity behind the panel. His hand suddenly froze. His breath caught. There, etched carefully into the metal housing, was a signature. A manufacturer's mark that only a handful of people in the world would recognize. NF7, Night Fury Project. His project. The system he had designed 7 years ago. The one that had destroyed his entire life. Reed's sharp voice cut through the silence like a blade. What is it? What did you find? Ethan closed his eyes for a long moment. His jaw worked. Then he stood slowly, his face carefully blank. I'll need about an hour to diagnose this properly. But the lieutenant commander had seen something. He'd been looking over Ethan's shoulder at the exact wrong moment. He leaned in closer, squinting at the panel Ethan had just removed. There was a marking on it, small and almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. A handwritten code etched into the metal. NFE, W Primary Design Lead. The lieutenant's face went completely pale. His mouth opened and closed twice before words came out. Sir, he said, his voice shaking badly. That's an original Night Fury engineering signature. The entire hangar went dead silent. Every head turned. Officers who'd been pretending not to watch suddenly stopped what they were doing. Reed stepped forward quickly, her boots echoing on the concrete floor. What did you just say? The lieutenant pointed with a trembling finger. That's the lead engineer's signature, ma'am. It's standard protocol on all experimental systems. The primary design engineer signs off on every core component they build. Reed's eyes snapped to Ethan, like a weapon locking on target. Her voice was dangerously quiet. You worked on Night Fury? Ethan didn't look up. His hands kept moving methodically, pulling wires, testing circuits, his face a mask of concentration. I didn't just work on it, he said quietly. I built it. Every system, every circuit, every failsafe. It was mine. The room absolutely erupted. Officers whispered urgently to each other. Someone audibly gasped. The lead engineer took a step backward. Reed's face went rigid, her expression turning to pure stone. That's impossible. Night Fury was one of the most classified projects in naval aviation history. The lead engineer was dishonorably discharged 7 years ago. After the fatal accident during test flight operations, that was me. Ethan's voice was completely flat, emotionless, drained of everything. He finally looked up from his work, meeting her eyes directly for the first time. I was that engineer. I designed the entire core system from the ground up, and I was dishonorably discharged after Lieutenant David Hayes died in the test flight. Reed's hands slowly clenched into fists at her sides. Then why in God's name are you here? Why are you fixing jets at midnight for contractor wages like some nobody? Ethan turned back to the panel, his jaw so tight it looked painful. Because I had a daughter. A baby who needed her father. Not a disgraced officer. Not a scapegoat for someone else's mistakes. A father she could be proud of. Ethan worked in tense silence for the next 20 minutes. His hands moved with the kind of absolute precision that only comes from years of designing systems so complex that only a handful of people in the entire world could understand them. The officers watched from a respectful distance now. But none of them spoke. The atmosphere had completely shifted. Reed stood 15 feet away, arms still crossed, her eyes never leaving Ethan's back. Her mind was racing, trying to remember details from 7 years ago, trying to reconcile the man in front of her with the ghost from a buried file. Then Ethan pulled another access panel free. Thick, acrid smoke immediately poured out. Alarms started screaming throughout the hangar. Red lights flashed. Fire in the auxiliary fuel bay, someone shouted. Officers scattered in trained chaos. The automatic fire suppression system kicked in with a loud hiss, but the flames were already spreading fast, licking hungrily up the inside of the jet's fuselage. Everyone back. Clear the area now. Reed's voice was sharp and commanding, cutting through the chaos, but Ethan didn't move. He was frozen, staring into the billowing black smoke. His face had gone white. There's someone still in there, he said. Reed spun around. What are you talking about? Martinez. Junior Tech. He was checking the fuel line connection 5 minutes ago. He's still inside the bay. The lieutenant commander grabbed Ethan's arm hard. The suppression system will handle it. We need to evacuate. Ethan ripped his arm free and ran. Straight into the fire. Reed's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stood frozen, watching in absolute disbelief as Ethan disappeared completely into the thick black smoke pouring from the jet's belly. Inside the bay, the heat was absolutely unbearable. Ethan's lungs immediately burned with every breath. His eyes watered so badly he could barely see. He dropped to his knees, crawling forward on instinct, keeping one hand on the hot fuselage wall to orient himself. Martinez. His voice came out raw and desperate. Then he saw him through the smoke. The young technician was pinned under a collapsed support panel, his left leg trapped at an ugly angle, his face twisted in pain and terror. Ethan grabbed the panel with both hands and lifted with everything he had. His shoulders screamed in protest. His arms shook violently from the effort and the heat. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Come on. Move. Martinez dragged himself free, crying out in pain. Ethan grabbed him under the arms and hauled him toward the exit, half dragging, half carrying him through the inferno. The flames roared around them like living things. The heat was so intense that Ethan genuinely felt like his skin was melting off his bones. They burst out of the smoke together and collapsed hard onto the cold hangar floor. Medics rushed forward immediately, surrounding Martinez. Reed stood over them both, her face completely ashen, all color drained from it. Why the hell did you do that? She demanded, her voice shaking. You could have died in there. Ethan coughed violently, gasping for clean air. His face was covered in soot. When he finally spoke, his voice was completely hoarse. If that had been my daughter trapped in there, I'd want someone to save her. Someone to run in when everyone else ran out. Reed stared down at him. Her hands were trembling visibly at her sides. For the first time in her entire military career, she truly understood what it meant to put another human being first. Not the mission, not the order, not the objective, the person. The fire was finally out. The hangar smelled like burnt metal, chemical foam, and failure. Ethan sat on the cold concrete floor with his back against a toolbox, trying to catch his breath. His hands were badly blistered and red. His face was completely streaked with black soot. His eyes were bloodshot. Reed approached slowly and stood in front of him. Her voice was quieter now, the sharp edge gone. "You said you built Night Fury from scratch." Ethan nodded once, not looking at her. "Then you know this system better than anyone else alive." "I used to." "Can you fix it? Can you get this jet operational?" Ethan looked up at her finally. His eyes were completely hollow, emptied out. "Why does it even matter?" "Because if you can't fix it, this mission fails. And a lot of people in dangerous places will get hurt because of it." Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. Another text from Sophie. "Daddy, I can't sleep. When are you coming home? I miss you." He stared at the screen for a long, painful moment. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. Then he stood up slowly, his entire body aching. "I'll fix it," he said quietly. Reed frowned slightly. "For the mission?" "No." Ethan's voice was soft, but it carried absolute weight. "Because I need to teach my daughter something important. That you don't quit on people, even when the world is completely against you, even when it's not fair, even when you've been hurt. You do the right thing anyway. You finish what you start. You help people who need you." He turned and walked back to the jet, without another word. Reed watched him go, her professional mask cracking. She felt something shift inside her chest, something she genuinely hadn't felt in years, maybe decades. Respect. Real respect. Ethan opened the deepest access panel, the one that led directly to the core relay system buried in the heart of the jet. It was an absolute maze of circuits, fail-safes, redundancies, and kill switches designed intentionally to be impossible to navigate without the original technical blueprints and months of training. But Ethan didn't need blueprints. He had drawn them. He'd built this entire system with his own hands 7 years ago. He knew every wire, every connection, every weakness, every flaw. His hands moved like a surgeon performing a complex operation. Precise. Confident. Certain. "I didn't leave the Navy because I was afraid of anything," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Reed, standing a few feet behind him, holding a work light, looked up. "I left because I couldn't let my daughter grow up thinking her father was a failure. That he was responsible for killing someone. That he was a disgrace." His voice cracked slightly. "She needed me to be clean, to be whole, to be someone she could be proud of. And I couldn't be that person if I stayed in uniform." Reed handed him a specialized tool without being asked. She didn't say anything. She just stood there quietly, holding the portable work light steady while he operated in the cramped space. It was the first time in her entire 30-year career that she had acted as someone's assistant. Ethan's hands moved with a steady rhythm that reminded her of something she couldn't quite place at first. Then it hit her. A craftsman, a father teaching a child how to build something carefully, patiently, with love. "My daughter absolutely loves to build things," Ethan said suddenly, his voice distant, almost dreamlike. "Legos, birdhouses, little wooden boats. She's got this tiny toolbox I bought her for her 7th birthday. Everything's pink. Pink hammer. Pink screwdriver. Pink level." He smiled, just barely, a ghost of warmth crossing his exhausted face. "She asks me every single night before bed, 'Daddy, can we build something together tomorrow? Please?'" Reed didn't respond. She just listened, something tightening in her throat. "I always tell her the same 3 things." Ethan continued quietly, his hands never stopping their precise work. "Be patient. Don't give up when it gets hard. And always do it right the first time, because fixing mistakes takes twice as long." He paused, carefully tightening a critical connection deep in the relay housing. "That's exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm not fixing this jet for your mission. I'm not doing it for Washington or the Navy or redemption or anything like that." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I'm doing it for her. So tomorrow morning when she wakes up and asks me what I did last night, I can tell her that Daddy didn't quit. That when people needed help, even people who hurt him, He helped them anyway. Because that's what good people do. Reed's throat constricted painfully. She'd spent her entire adult life following orders without question, completing missions efficiently, climbing ranks methodically, making hard decisions quickly. She'd never once stopped to ask herself the simple questions. Why? For whom? At what cost? You're a better officer than most of the people wearing uniforms in this room, she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion she couldn't quite hide. Ethan shook his head firmly. I'm not an officer anymore, ma'am. I haven't been for 7 years. I'm just a dad trying to get home to make breakfast for his little girl. Reed really looked at him this time, seeing him completely for the first time. And in that moment, she finally saw the true cost of command. The families sacrificed, the lives broken, the good people destroyed by systems that valued efficiency over humanity. Ethan pulled the final damaged relay free from its housing. His face immediately went pale. His hands froze. What is it? Reed asked, stepping closer. What's wrong? This relay's been corroded for months. Maybe longer. It should have been identified and replaced during standard monthly maintenance cycles. The lead engineer stepped forward quickly. Defensive. That's impossible, sir. We run full diagnostics every single week without fail. Then, someone deliberately missed it during inspection. Ethan's voice had turned hard now, cold in a way it hadn't been all night. Or someone didn't want to see it. Or someone wanted it to fail at exactly the right moment. Reed's eyes narrowed dangerously. What exactly are you suggesting? Ethan stood slowly, turning to face her directly. His hands were shaking slightly, whether from exhaustion or anger she couldn't tell. I'm saying this jet didn't fail by accident tonight. Someone wanted it to fail. Someone wanted it to fail badly enough that you'd have no choice but to bring in outside help. And they wanted to make absolutely sure that the only person who could possibly fix it in time would be me. The entire room went cold. Officers exchanged nervous glances. The air pressure seemed to drop. Reed's tactical mind was already racing through implications, connections, possibilities. Why would anyone do that? Ethan met her eyes directly. You really don't know? You honestly don't remember? Reed's face went blank. Genuinely confused, Ethan's voice dropped low, quiet, and absolutely dangerous. 7 years ago, Lieutenant David Hayes died during a Night Fury test flight operation. The official investigation concluded it was engineer error. My error. My negligence. My faulty design. He took a step closer to her. The final report was classified, signed, sealed, and buried so deep that nobody would ever question it. I was dishonorably discharged within 72 hours. I was blacklisted from every defense contractor in the country. My security clearance was permanently stripped. I couldn't get work anywhere in the entire sector. His voice started trembling with barely controlled emotion. I lost everything in 3 days. My career, my reputation, my future, my ability to provide for my infant daughter. Reed's breath caught in her chest. Her mind was racing backward through years of reports and decisions. The officer who personally signed that final report. Ethan said, his voice breaking slightly. The officer who closed the investigation without allowing any appeal or independent review was you, Admiral Reed. The words hit her like a physical blow. Reed's knees almost buckled. She suddenly remembered. The report. The intense pressure from Washington to close the case quickly and quietly. The political implications. The budget concerns. The need for a clean narrative. She'd signed it without asking hard questions. Without digging deeper. Without considering that a real human life was about to be destroyed. I didn't know the full situation. You didn't care about the full situation. Ethan's voice finally cracked completely. You didn't care that I had a 1-year-old daughter who'd just lost her mother. You didn't care that I was telling the truth. You just needed someone to blame, so you could close the file and move on to the next mission. Reed's hands were shaking visibly now. I was following orders from above, so was I. The hangar was absolutely silent. Every officer stood completely frozen, hardly breathing, watching the confrontation unfold like witnesses to a car crash. Reed's voice came out barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. I am so deeply sorry. Ethan turned away from her, his shoulders sagging. Doesn't change anything that happened. Doesn't give me back 7 years. But it did change something. And they both knew it. Ethan stared down at the corroded relay in his blistered hands. The jet's core system was completely exposed now, a complex tangle of wires and circuits glowing faintly in the harsh work lights. The pressure gauge on the main compression chamber was steadily climbing into the red zone. Dangerous territory. We've got a serious problem, the lead engineer said urgently, his voice tight with fear. The core's overheating badly. If it hits critical threshold, the entire system could explode. We're talking about enough force to take out half this hangar. Reed stepped forward quickly. How long before it reaches critical? 10 minutes. Maybe less. Maybe a lot less. Every eye in the hangar turned to Ethan. He was staring at the compression chamber access hatch. It was small, barely wide enough for a grown man to squeeze through. And it was glowing. The temperature inside was already climbing past 200 degrees Fahrenheit and rising fast. Nobody goes in there, Reed said firmly, her command voice back. We evacuate immediately and let it blow in a controlled manner. Ethan shook his head slowly. If it blows, the mission fails completely, and you'll lose the only working prototype of this navigation system in existence. There's no backup. No replacement. This is it. I don't care about the mission anymore, I do. Ethan pulled on a pair of heavy thermal gloves from the emergency kit. His hands were already badly blistered and burned from the earlier fire, but he didn't even hesitate. Reed grabbed his arm hard. You'll die in there. The heat alone will kill you in under 3 minutes. Ethan looked at her. His eyes were completely calm now. Steady. At peace. I have to survive. I have to get home. My daughter's waiting for breakfast. I promised her pancakes this morning. Reed's grip on his arm tightened desperately. What makes you think you can possibly survive that? Ethan gently pulled his arm free from her grasp. His voice was soft. Love. That's what makes me survive everything impossible. Love for my daughter. It's the only thing that's kept me alive for 7 years. He opened the access hatch. Superheated air poured out like opening a blast furnace. The wave of heat was so intense that officers 30 feet away had to shield their faces and step back. Ethan didn't step back. He took one deep breath of cool air, then climbed inside. The compression chamber was a complete nightmare. The metal walls glowed dull red in the darkness. The air was so thick and hot that Ethan could barely draw breath without his lungs screaming in protest. His skin felt like it was literally on fire. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to get out, to escape, to survive. But he kept moving forward. One hand on the scorching wall for guidance, one foot carefully in front of the other. His vision started to blur from the heat and lack of oxygen. He reached the relay core housing. His hands were shaking badly now. His vision kept going dark at the edges. His lungs felt like they were full of molten metal. But his hands stayed steady enough. He pulled the completely destroyed relay free. The metal so hot, it burned even through the thermal gloves. Then he slammed the new replacement unit into place with the last of his strength. The system beeped once, twice, 3 times. Then suddenly all the warning lights flickered. The pressure gauge dropped rapidly. The emergency alarms went silent. Throughout the entire jet, systems hummed back to life one by one. Ethan collapsed. They pulled him out fast. 2 officers reached in and dragged his limp body from the chamber. His face was bright red, almost purple. His breathing was rapid and shallow. His skin was covered in burns. Medics immediately surrounded him, checking vitals, wrapping burns, starting an IV line, administering oxygen. Reed dropped to her knees beside him, her professional composure completely shattered. Her voice was shaking badly. Why did you do that? Why did you risk your life? Ethan's eyes fluttered open weakly. He looked at her, his voice coming out as barely a whisper, rough and damaged. Can I go home now? Please? Reed's eyes filled with tears that she couldn't control or hide. She nodded quickly. Yes, yes, you can go home now. You're done. You've done more than enough. Ethan's eyes started to close again. A small smile crossed his burned face. Good. That's good. Sophie's making pancakes this morning. She learned from a YouTube video. They're going to be terrible. But I promised I'd eat every single one. His voice got even quieter. She's waiting for me. The entire hangar had gone completely silent. Every single officer stood at rigid attention, watching. Some had tears in their own eyes. Reed stood slowly, pulling herself together with visible effort. She turned to face her entire team, her voice steady but raw with emotion. I want everyone here to hear this clearly. She looked down at Ethan, then back at the assembled officers. 7 years ago, I signed a report that completely destroyed this man's career and his life. I didn't ask the hard questions. I didn't push for a real investigation. I just followed my orders and moved on without looking back. Her voice cracked audibly. I was wrong. I was completely, terribly wrong. She knelt again, this time directly in front of Ethan with her head slightly bowed. I'm sorry. I am so deeply sorry. For what I did to you. For what I did to your daughter. For what I stole from both of you. Ethan opened his eyes again. He looked at her for a long moment. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The medics were preparing to move him to the base hospital. Reed stood and addressed the entire room again, her command voice returning. As of right now, I am personally reopening the Night Fury investigation with full transparency, and I'm recommending Ethan Walker for immediate full reinstatement to the Navy with complete honors and back pay. The lead engineer stepped forward hesitantly. Ma'am, with all due respect, he's been a civilian contractor for 7 years. He's a father. Reed cut him off. Her voice like steel. He's a father who just saved this entire mission, not for glory, not for recognition, not for redemption. He did it so his daughter would know that her father doesn't quit on people who need help. She looked directly at Ethan again. That's exactly the kind of officer I want in my Navy. That's the kind of person we should all aspire to be. Ethan shook his head weakly from the stretcher. I don't want reinstatement, ma'am. Reed frowned, confused. Why not? You've earned it. You've more than earned it. Ethan's voice was barely audible now, fading, because my daughter doesn't need a hero or a decorated officer. She just needs her dad. That's all she's ever needed. 2 weeks later, Admiral Catherine Reed stood in front of a full review board in Washington, D.C. The room was filled with high-ranking officers, Pentagon officials, and congressional oversight representatives. She presented the complete reinvestigation into the Night Fury incident. New evidence that had been ignored. Witness testimonies that had never been properly recorded. Independent engineering reports that contradicted the original findings. The conclusion was absolutely unanimous. Ethan Walker had been completely and unjustly blamed for a mechanical failure that he had actually warned about in 3 separate reports. Reports that had been systematically ignored by his superiors. The real cause of Lieutenant Hayes' tragic death was a critical manufacturing defect in the fuel injection system. Something completely outside of Ethan's control or responsibility. His discharge was immediately overturned. His record was completely cleared and corrected. His security clearance was fully restored. 7 years of injustice were officially acknowledged. Reed personally delivered the news to him at the base. It was early morning. Ethan was in the parking lot, loading tools into the back of his old truck, preparing for another long shift. Walker. He turned around. Reed stood a few feet away, holding an official folder with military seals on it. It's done, she said simply. Your name is completely cleared. The record has been corrected. Full reinstatement, with your original rank, is on the table if you want it. Full back, pay for 7 years. Benefits. Everything. Ethan took the folder carefully. He opened it and scanned the first page slowly. Then he closed it gently. I genuinely appreciate this, ma'am. More than you know. Reed hesitated, choosing her words carefully. The Navy could really use someone like you. Someone with your skills. Your integrity. Your character. Ethan shook his head with a small, sad smile. The Navy has thousands of talented engineers, ma'am. But my daughter only has one father, and she needs that father home for dinner every night. Reed smiled slightly. It was genuine. She's very lucky to have you. Ethan's expression softened. I'm the lucky one. I get to be her dad. That's the greatest privilege of my entire life. He climbed into his truck and started the engine. Reed stepped forward one more time. Walker. He looked back at her through the open window. For whatever it's worth, Reed said quietly, you're the best officer I've ever had the privilege of working with. And I've worked with hundreds. Ethan smiled. Really smiled this time. I'm not an officer anymore, ma'am. I haven't been for a long time. I'm just a dad doing his best. He put the truck in gear and drove away slowly. Reed stood there watching until his truck disappeared around the corner. The sun was just beginning to rise over San Diego, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The naval base was quiet in the early morning. The night shift ending. The day shift not yet begun. Admiral Catherine Reed stood alone in the empty hangar F-57, looking at the experimental jet that Ethan had saved. It was scheduled to deploy in less than 3 hours. The mission he'd rescued would proceed exactly as planned. She thought about that impossible night 2 weeks ago. The fire and chaos, the impossible heat. The man who'd walked straight into hell to save a machine he didn't care about and a mission that had destroyed his life. He'd done it anyway. Because it was the right thing to do. Because his daughter was watching. Even though she'd never know what really happened. Even though she'd just see her dad come home tired and make her pancakes. Reed pulled out her phone. She typed a message carefully. Thank you. For reminding me why we serve. For showing me what true courage looks like. For being better than all of us. She stared at the message for a long moment. Then she deleted it without sending. She didn't need to send it. Outside, the morning honor guard was assembling for colors. As the American flag slowly rose against the dawn sky, every officer present stood at perfect attention, saluting. But Reed wasn't thinking about the flag or the ceremony. She was thinking about a 38-year-old man who drove home every single night to make dinner for his daughter. A man who'd sacrificed absolutely everything. His career, his reputation, his future, his pride. Not for medals or recognition or glory. For love, for the chance to be present in his child's life. That afternoon, Ethan picked Sophie up from school like he did every day. She came running out the front doors, her pink backpack bouncing on her shoulders. Her face lit up with pure joy. Daddy! Daddy! Guess what happened today? Ethan knelt down and caught her in a tight hug. Tell me everything, sweetheart. She pulled back, practically vibrating with excitement. I got an A on my science project. Mrs. Henderson said it was the best one in the whole class. She said I might be an engineer someday. Just like you. Ethan felt his chest swell with pride, so intense it almost hurt. I'm so incredibly proud of you, Sophie. You worked so hard on that project. She grinned up at him. Can we build something together tonight, please? I have a new idea. Ethan laughed. The sound genuine and free. Absolutely. What do you want to make? A rocket ship. A big one that we can put in the front yard. Ethan stood and took her small hand in his. A rocket ship it is. We'll stop and get supplies on the way home. They walked to his old truck together, hand in hand, her chattering happily about her day. As Ethan opened the passenger door for her, Sophie suddenly looked up at him with those serious eyes that reminded him so much of her mother. Daddy, how come you always look so tired? Ethan paused, his chest tightening. He knelt down again so they were eye level. Because I work really hard, sweetheart. So you can have everything you need. So you never have to worry. Sophie's face scrunched up thoughtfully. But I don't need everything, Daddy. I just need you. Just you being here is enough. Ethan felt tears prick his eyes. He pulled her into another hug, holding her tight. You've got me, Sophie. Always. Forever. No matter what. I promise. She hugged him back just as tightly. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, baby. More than anything in the entire world, they drove home together as the sun set behind them, painting the California sky in brilliant colors. Ethan helped Sophie with her homework at the kitchen table. They made dinner together, her favorite: spaghetti with way too much Parmesan cheese. After dinner, they went out to the small backyard and started sketching designs for their rocket ship on graph paper by flashlight. Sophie fell asleep that night with a smile on her face, dreaming about rocket ships and stars. Ethan sat in her doorway like he did every night, watching her breathe, listening to the peaceful sound of her sleeping. And he knew with absolute certainty that he'd made the right choice. Every single time. Some men fix jets. Some men fix broken systems and correct injustices. But a father who puts his child above absolutely everything, above career, above pride, above recognition, above revenge, can fix both. And in the end, that's the only thing that really matters.